In this lesson, we want to start with our modeling, and I also want to talk with you about a really interesting and important concept inside of Houdini, the groups concept. Groups are one way of helping us to model in a procedural way, the big strength of Houdini. And in the other two Houdini practice hour projects, I used the direct modeling approach, so I really made selections and showed you all the modeling tools. Now in this Houdini practice hour, I want to give you more ideas how to achieve a procedural approach. So the model will not be completely procedural, but you learn the important concept of groups and how you make selections more intelligent to have a more procedural approach. And I think in one of the next Houdini practice hours, we will do a full procedural project. Let's get started here first by rearranging my desktop. So I've stored from one of my last Houdini practice hours here my desktop layout where I have two columns here, and I also want to make sure if you have restarted your Houdini or come now to this lesson after days, for example, after you've restarted, that you are in the right project. So I go here into my Houdini project, which we built together here, Coffee, there it is. You have to make sure that you see all the subfolders here and then click accept. And so you see now the job variable is set here into this Houdini project. And then I can go here to file open, click here on job so that I'm in the project which I want to work with. And here's our CoffeeCup 01, which we have built together. After loading, I'm here in the compositing context because there we left. We have here now our PNG. I've exchanged it into the PNG which we built together in the last lesson in PureRef. And to see that, we normally need a composite view. Here it is. And if I scroll out or click here this little house icon here, I can see now here are the cups and the beans, but I don't want to switch all the time into this compositing context. So what I do is I go back here to the scene view and I add here a compositing view in this area where normally the parameters are. Let's take a look how to do that. You go here to this right column here, and then you can click here this little plus sign. Then we have here a new pane tab or a new pane tab, and you can select a type, and here under viewers you find here the composite view. That's it. After selecting now here the file, and it takes a while, it loads now this image, and now you see here it is. And what I can do now, let's go back here to my normal world. I can now switch into this world all the time. What you also can do is we can collapse here this right column here by this divider. You see in the lower section here you have an arrow to the right, and in the higher section here you have an arrow to the left, or you can move it here to the side if you need. And yeah, so this is really good concept to work. And if you need more estate, what I do really often is I collapse it here completely. And if I have now a node which I want to change, let's add a geo here, which we name cup. We can select it and press the P key like parameters, and then you see here the parameters open. And yeah, you can press the P key again to get rid of them. So we have now our geometry container. I dive into the container here. And I want now to start here with the base. And if we take a look here into our reference images, you see the base here is round. And then we have this paper here going upwards. It's a little bit going out. So I start with a circle and then we extrude everything up. Let's do that now. I first add a circle here. Okay, here it is. And the next step is now we have to change some parameters. First thing you maybe notice is that this circle is perfectly round. The reason for this is, select here the node, press the P key, and we can get rid here of that for a moment. You see that this here is a primitive, and a primitive has no polygons. So it's really a shape which is mathematically generated, and you also can test this with your middle mouse button. If you go over the node, you see it's one circle here. It's only 1 point primitive and vertex, so no polygons at all. We want to do polygon modeling, so we need polygons. So switch this here to polygons. Then we want to change the orientation. I want it on the floor, so ZX. Okay, now it's there. And now we have to decide how many polygons we need. I don't want to do it too high poly, but I also want to have it symmetrical, so let's try 16, for example. And now you see it's still symmetrical. We have the corners here, and yeah, this is, I think, a good amount to start with. The next thing you maybe see is that this circle is now blue, and on the back side it's white or grayish. That means that this circle is now looking in the opposite direction. You look to the back face here. So that's Houdini's way of indicating in which direction you look onto a polygon or primitive. So to reverse that, we can use a reverse node. So I click now here, the output. I have here my line. I press then the tab key and I type reverse. And now if the submenu opens, you can use your arrow keys on your keyboard to search for the right node, and if you have found that, you can press the enter key. But if you only press the enter key, the display flag is still sitting on the node where you are at the moment, and then you have to set your display flag by hand. Little trick here, if you hold down the shift key and press with shift pressed enter, you will see that the node is added and also the display flag is sitting now here on the reverse node. So it's much faster to work like this here. Great. Next thing is we need poly extrude, and this is something you know from the other lessons. And instead of working now all the time with my radial menu, which we've done before, so you see polygon modeling is here, I want to work today a little bit more here directly in the network view to show you a little bit more how you work here and also some tips and tricks. So let's click here again and we take a polygon extrude. And the cool thing in this tab menu is you don't have to write it completely. So it's enough to write PO, for example, because you know it's polygon extrude or it's a polygon tool. And then I press the space bar and you see we still have a bunch of nodes here, too many nodes. And I know that's extrude, so E and X. And now you see we only have 3 nodes left. I can now use my arrow keys, press enter, or better, shift enter. So POEX, shift enter, that's it. Now the poly extrude sits here and we can work with that. You can now use here your parameters directly. So here's the distance, the inset, and so on. But what you also can do, little tip, if you want to reset something, make a right mouse button click and look here, revert to defaults, control middle mouse button click. So if you go here and make a middle mouse button click here, with your control key pressed, you can reset values here. If you want to reset a whole node, you can go here to this cogwheel and revert to factory defaults if you want to do something like that here. Okay, let's go on. We have now a poly extrude. You can work here or you can work interactively in the viewport. For this we need the handle tool. You get the handle tool here by pressing this icon here, or you can press the enter key. That's the keyboard shortcut for the handle tool. And the handle tool gives you now more options. We have here this little HUD where you can insert distance, divisions, and so on. You have here this option bar, which is a small version of this here. And yeah, if you know what's behind that, it's really easy. You go here to distance, for example, make a middle mouse button click here, and then you can use your value ladder to change values here. Or you can use the value ladder on these icons here. So if you go, for example, to the red line here and drag, you change it full interactively, but you also can go over this red line, make a middle mouse button click, and go in steps up and down. And this is sometimes more precise. Let's bring it here to the height of our cup. Let's take a look here. Yeah, maybe something like that here. Not bad. And now we have to go out here. To do that, we can use the inset here. And the inset is also interactive in the viewport. For this, we use our mouse wheel. Keep in mind, this only works if the handle tool is active. So, mouse wheel, change the insert in 0.1 steps. And this is not fine enough for my taste. So what I do now is I hold down the Shift key, and then you see I have a much finer control about this because now it's 0.01. Let's make something like that here. Okay. Now this is our first extrusion. Let's get rid of that. Or we want now to do this lip here. You see we go a little bit out, a little bit up, a little bit in. So let's do that. Goodbye. And for this, we need now the next step. And like I've promised you, we want to talk now a little bit about groups and why we use them and how we get to a procedural approach. Let's name this node really fast, only that you know in a moment what you're doing. We add the next poly extrude, and if we go now here and press the tab key, little tip, last nodes are always here, so we can use a poly extrude also from here. I click this now here, the display flag, and now comes a problem. If we now go again to distance, you get something which you don't like. You see, doesn't work like expected. Why? Because when we started here, we only had one polygon, one primitive. And so this node here changes everything, extruded everything which came in here, the one primitive. In this node here, we now have to tell Houdini which polygon you want to extrude, because in the moment, it takes the whole data stream here, every polygon. And this is not useful in our case. So how to do that? So let's switch it on and off and take a look here. So everything. To change now what you want to extrude, we used in the older lessons, so in the last projects, selections. You remember what we have done. We first selected something in viewport and then we used the radial menu and we had a selection for this. Take a look what happens if we do that. I bring this to the side, set the display flag back here to the height. And then I go the same route we've done before. We went in, we selected this primitive here. If you are in the selection tool, you can go here to the primitive mode. And remember the keyboard shortcuts. If you are in the selection tool, you can use 2, 3, and 4 on your keyboard to switch between these three modes here. And then we press the C key, went to poly extrude, click, tool is active. We move this up only to demonstrate something, and that's it. And now take a look here. I have to rewire this so you see that's the same step like this here. You see here that in the group field we have now a number which is 0, and this is your selection. So Houdini stores a selection, in our case here, with the so named primitive numbers. Every polygon, every edge, every point has a number. And this is the number of this polygon here. It's a primitive 0 here. If you want to do that by hand, you can do that. Let's test this again. We go back to our poly extrude here. The moment it doesn't work, it brings everything out here. We can now type here the number of the polygon which we want to change. For this, we have to know the number. We can do it in two ways. We can go here to this node first. Then we take a look here on the right side, and here you see numbers. These are the point numbers, and these are the primitive numbers. If you click this, you now see small numbers in your viewport, and you see that this polygon here is the polygon number 0. So we can go to this poly extrude and tell the system under group 0. And after you pressed enter, you now see that you only change this polygon here. Great. Now you know how selections work. And another little tip which you have to keep in mind, which makes problems for trainees sometimes, if you go here and you make your selection, you enter now poly extrude here, everything seems to be fine. So poly extrude, it's there. We can directly now change that. Everything is fine, great. But sometimes it doesn't work. And the reason for this is that here. They say poly extrude, but they don't use the tab key over the viewport. they select it here, they go here over the network view and right here poly extrude. And then Houdini doesn't use the selection which is in the viewport. You see this field is empty. So keep that in mind if you want that Houdini adds a node with the selection active in the viewport. You have to add the node over the viewport here with the tab menu. Okay. But what happens if you want to add now a selection to a group field and you don't want to type the numbers? For this, we have this white arrow here. So if you click the white arrow, look here what the display flag does. We are here on poly extrude. The moment you click that, you see the display flag goes back to the node before, and we get here a special flag here. That means we change this node here, but we see this node here, the node before the thing we do. And there's another really important thing, and this is this sentence here. Select the geometry for the group parameter for poly extrude number 1. And if you are finished, press enter when done. And I add to this sentence, press enter when done over the viewport. Also important. So if you now select this polygon here and now press enter, you see now the selection is placed here inside of this field. That's the whole magic behind that. If we now model in a direct way, this is really easy to do. So we have now this here. We normally don't want to go up, so control middle mouse button click here. We want to insert a little bit to the outside. Yeah, something like that. Then we need the next poly extrude. We can click here again, poly extrude again. Then we go a little bit up here. Let's do it this time. Interactive. Here, I have to select the polygon. You see, takes time, but it works. So then we want to have the next extrusion. Select the polygon here again. And a little tip, if you press the Q key over the viewport, you always get the last operation. So you see Houdini adds now the next poly extrude. We can now hold down the shift key and use the scroll wheel to bring this in. Okay. These numbers are a little bit distracting at the moment. And this was the way we've done before our modeling. And you see nothing wrong with that. It works fine. But now comes the problem. This is a full direct approach of modeling, which you maybe do in applications like Maya, Blender, Cinema 4D, and so on, because every step depends on the other step before. But you run into a problem if you now want to change some parameters here. Let's take a look in that. You remember the numbers of the primitives? I deactivated them. I do it again. So if we have the height here, we had this polygon 0 here. The next poly extrude, which we used for bringing this out here, used the 0. But now, you see, because of the new polygons which Houdini generated, suddenly the polygon number 0 is not on the top anymore. It's somewhere else. I think here it is. That's polygon number 0 now. And this polygon here is now 16. And because you used interactively selections, it worked. You see, if you select now this node here, 16 is here in, and then this polygon suddenly is now 32 because we have new polygons and we use 32, and now the next polygon we have to use is 48, and so on and so on. So let's add a poly extrude here again. I now do it everything by hand, so I set my poly extrude here, I type in 48 because that's the selection we want to do. I make my distance here and it works. And now we want to talk about this group field here. You can use more than one selection here because sometimes you don't want to extrude only one polygon, you want to extrude more than one and so on. And for this you can have a sequence of selections. And to do that here in these fields, it's really important that you remember that you don't use a comma or something like that. You use a space here inside of this list. So for example, if you go back here to poly extrude 3 and we want to extrude, for example, 59 and 51 instead of 48, you have to write here. Let's go here. 59 and 51 with the space. And if you now take a look here, you see it worked fine here. So this is a sequence. And you will see also the sequence if you click now here, our arrow, which we've worked with, then we go here and say, I hold down the Shift key to add here something to the selection, and now I press the Enter key over the viewport. And now you see, yeah, it works fine because we have now a nice sequence here. But where's the problem with that? Because, like I've said, in other programs it works like that. If you now decide to, for example, go back to the circle here, and you don't want to use 16 divisions, you want to use, for example, 32 divisions, the model is screwed up. Where is the problem? The problem starts here. If you now go here to the height and first go to reverse, here everything was still fine. You see this is polygon 0. Then we went to the height, and if you now take a look here, we have more polygons on the side, but lucky enough this is still 0. Then we go to this poly extrude, this is 32. We go here, 16, and now it makes a problem because your numbers have changed. And this is the big problem if you use this direct modeling approach. You really depend on numbers. And in our step, which we now want to do is, I want to get rid of numbers. I want to work with intelligent selections. Let's try this. I remove all these here. And what I do now here is I want to tell the system that I want to work with this polygon here. And to store a selection or to generate intelligent selection, we use groups inside of Houdini. So let's make a group. If you click here and type the word group, you see there's a whole bunch of different nodes which you can use. There are two nodes which you generate groups with. At the first side, there's a group create and a group node. And you will see if I use a group create here or a group node, it results in the same node. So there's no real difference between these two. And what this group node does now, I set the display flag, is it gives me different kind of selection methods to generate a group. What I want to do is I want to name this polygon here, which we want to use for extrusion. So the group name is top. So that's the name of the polygon, which we want to do. Then you decide what kind of group you want to have. And as I told you, you can have primitives, points, edges, and vertices. In our case, we want to store primitives. And then you decide here how to do that. These are all options which you can combine. You enable and disable these. For the base group, this is the most easiest one. So if you tick this here, you have a selector and you can select the polygon here, or you let this field open. But if you have it open, that's really important, you make a selection. So if I now hold down the middle mouse button here over this node, you see that our top group here is a primitive group top, has one item because this field is empty, and so everything is now part of the group. For this case here, absolutely okay, because we only have one polygon and it doesn't change if you change the divisions here. It's still one polygon here. Great. If you want, you can also name the node. That's sometimes a problem. This here is the group name which you generate, and this is only the node name, which you maybe don't need. Okay. Next step is now we want to take the height. So for this we need a poly extrude. Shift enter. We name it height. Then I change the distance only that you see what happens now. And you see, okay, because we only have one polygon, everything moves, but now you see an empty group field. And I said to you, this means everything. What we can do now to make sure that only the top polygon moves upwards, we can add the name here. So you can write top if you like. That's okay. Houdini understands that. That's the idea. But if you are not sure how this here is written, or you want to see what's happening, you can open up this drop down here and you see there's a top group. And if you select this, Houdini adds the name here. So now you make sure that only the top group changes. Cool. So let's deactivate the numbers here for a moment. I make this now a little bit higher. Bring this out. here, maybe something like that. Let's check it from the side. Yeah, something like that maybe. Next step, we want to insert this top polygon. Before we had a number. Now, how we get now this top polygon? Cool thing, Houdini preserves groups. If the group is still there, it's preserved. That means if you go now over this node here and make a middle mouse button click, you see it's still there. It's still top with one item. To check what's inside of a group, you can use here a tool. You see on the right side here, there's this little icon, display groups and attribute lists. If you click that and you are in the right mode, that's the important thing. So to make sure, you can go to the select tool, and here you see now you are in points mode. There is no group in the points, no group in the edges, but here on the polygons there's a group with the name top, and you can go over that, not in a group, all polygons, and here the top polygon is the exception. This is inside of the top group. And if you want to change the colors, here you can activate and deactivate them. Can make a double click here and say, I want to see it in green, for example. So if you have many groups, this is sometimes useful. So you see, the group is still there. Let's do it. So I go here now, Poly Extrude, Shift Enter. Now we want to bring the lip out. So I name it lip out so that you later know what's going on. Now we say we want to use the top polygon here. So we go to top. Now we use insert. I bring it out a little bit. Yeah, now we look here. Okay, maybe something like that here. We've done, and group is still there. Great. But now it's a new polygon, but the group is still there. Cool. Next step, Poly Extrude, Shift Enter. We want to use top again, and you see we need a faster way to do that. I change the distance a little bit up. Okay. And how to get this faster? Sometimes I do the following trick. Let's name it first. It's the lip height. I duplicate this node by Alt drag or Option drag. You get a copy of this node. I rewire it and I make a Control middle mouse button click here, what I don't need. And then we can insert it again. And now we are at the same point we were before. But this time we use this top group name. And now comes the point, does it work? So I go back to the circle, and you remember we destroyed everything before when we changed the divisions, and now I go in and change the divisions. And now you see everything stays where it belongs. So this system is much more intelligent to use than the other system. This is the first step in procedural modeling. In the next lesson, we will finish the cup here, and I show you more ideas which you can use, also some expressions which we want to use. And I hope this was helpful. My name is Holger Maus from pixeltrain. See you in the next lesson.